recording now. Okie doke. So, hello and welcome everyone to our show and tell part 9. The theme of dreams came up after we ended up talking about those special places we keep as memories in our mind, which we can go and visit to find solace, peace, perspective and strength. And that's thanks to David, who obviously took us to one of his very special places that exists in perfection in his head. So, thinking about dreams, in a way, they can take on many dimensions. They can be a guiding metaphor, an inspiration, an aspiration, an illusion, a scary place, and a hopeful place, and many more. I mean, in art, if you look at art, dreams in art, they've been depicted in many ways. And throughout the ages, visual artists have been fascinating by trying to capture this place that we go to when we sleep. But as always with this group, we don't want to just look at dreams in that sense. There are more interpretations than just depicting what happens when we sleep. And as always, this group goes beyond the obvious. And I've loved the little teaser photos that Graham showed, kind of looking at those many different interpretations, mind games, Dreamcatcher, Dreams by Dan Hillier, and as well Roger's interpretation of Sacre Bleu and terming these events a Zoomathon, which I thought was quite accurate. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Graham for the first presentation and, just kind of insight into, dreams. Over to you, Graham.
Right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Everybody okay? Really, it just falls on what Marianne was saying. I've not put a lot of effort into this. It's only going to be a 10-minute quick chat about different interpretations and different ways we can use dreams, in our lifestyle, our lives in the waking hours rather than just during night hours. That's the whole premise of what I'm talking about, really. I think, as Marianne quite rightly identified, dreams are something which we're all kind of experts on. We're all kind of pretty well informed about what they're like to experience, how they occur, the kind of impact it can have upon us. And so we're all kind of familiar with it, even children. And so I think as artists, when you first get involved in the visual arts world, one of the things that you gravitate towards is surrealism. We always tend to look towards, I remember, as like a 10-year-old being aware of Magritte and Salvador Dali, that kind of thing. And then you get Egon Schiele comes in as like the classic artist that every art student follows, or everybody, gets involved in the art world. And that surrealism is a very early kind of inspiration and kind of influence. And I guess I've used it. I've made abstract work, I've made superrealism, I've made sculpture. Whatever I make, it's always got a strain or thread of surrealism running through it. Sometimes low, very low, resonates at a fairly low level, and other times it's extreme. And I like it. I think it's got a certain way of, I guess, resonating with other people, because I know they're all experts in it as well. They all understand, the weird and wonderful and kind of unexpected and shocking and surprising. It just sticks in your mind when you see an image like that. So I think the other thing with the surrealist word, that the word, became very about technique, and it kind of lost its gravitas as far as a serious movement goes. In my mind now, I think there's much more interesting work that's come from surrealism. So just that very early, nascent kind of influence that we all experience, growing up in the art world and being aware of people like Dali, people like that. And it does seem to remind us of those things that we have during the night, where the world is not ordered, it's not logical. It's a different world. And it's a world that, I love it really. I love all that stuff. And I think, the more we can take from those night hours into our working hours, the better we'll all feel, rather than just doing what's expected of us, do what's unexpected sometimes, do what's maybe, a bit different. And divergent thinking comes from that, being able to look at a situation, not just imagine what you expect to happen, but imagine the plethora of things that you wouldn't expect to happen. So, I'm interested in that really. And every image I make, I always look at it through those eyes, especially in photography. I always try and find something which people would remember or people would recall, or it would resonate with their kind of perception of the dream experience. So that's like the introduction. And I think, so the the kind of proposition I'm putting forward really is the way we channel those experiences and make it into a positive, rather than being a victim of it. So a lot of our victims have been a victim of dreams, nightmares really. And I'm just going to tell a very quick anecdote about my father. He built his own house. I used to take the piss out of him when he was younger for not being that adventurous as an accountant, not being that adventurous. When I look back, he built his own house for us, when he was 32 or something like that. And all his brothers, they're all builders, they all joined in, built this house. But it was in 1973, 74. And at that time, there was an austerity thing going on, and building materials were very difficult to get. So, bricks were very expensive, plasterboard, chipboard, plaster, all the basic building materials were very expensive. And during that time, we lived in our first house, and when the house was built, for about 3 years after that, he started having these night terrors, and he would dream that he was swallowing building materials, and he'd wake up, viscerally choking. It sounded like he was really choking. My mum would kind of try and bring him out of it, and it wouldn't be once, it'd be like 3 or 4 times every night. And that went on for a number of years. And I said to him, what's going on? What do you mean you're swallowing a brick? He said, do you mean a bit of it? He said, no, I'm swallowing the full brick. I said, what about plastic? No, I'm swallowing the full plasterboard. So it was brilliant, really, the way his mind was working. All to do with the stress, that was invoked by, the shortage of materials and the expense it was costing. And it was all that. Fast forward to, I've just loved dreams. So I've kind of, I had bad dreams, I've never really taken that. But I did start, when I left work, I started to get a similar thing to my dad. I seem to share the same kind of passage. As we've grown old, we seem to be sharing the same kind of ailments, really. So when I left work, although this wasn't an austerity thing, it was more to do with just losing a structure or a kind of, I guess a reason to my life. But it was really the structure, really. Kind of something to think about all the time and work on. So as I started, going off in my own divergent paths, there wasn't one main thing. It was like bits and pieces of stuff. I lost my identity a little bit, and I had to reform that. I did it on purpose, and I left voluntarily, so it wasn't a thing that was an issue. I admit I wanted to go. It was the right time, but it did have an impact on me. I started having similar repeat night terrors, waking up with things going wrong, imagining things going wrong with the family, things going wrong, all sorts of things, accidents and all kinds of crazy shit really going on. And it wasn't that once, but I'd wake up, hyperventilating, I'm asthmatic anyway, and I would find Jane would have to wake, telling me how to breathe, and it happened maybe 3 times a night. It went on for, I don't know, maybe a few months. So I kind of had a similar thing. All I wasn't swallowing plasterboards, I was, with my own way, experiencing something of that, and that's not enjoyable for anybody to sustain and experience. I know some people do really suffer with that. So I think what you've got to do, and what I learned to do, was take control back. Really, I was trying to take control back, and rather than that impacting on me and using me, I was going to use it. I was going to use a subconscious mind, to my benefit, not be a victim of it, but turn it round and become the master of it, really. And so what I did, I've done this for a long time, I kept a book. I don't know if you find this, but as you're falling asleep, you often get some of my best ideas come to me when I'm not really asleep, but in that halfway period, just before falling asleep, a few minutes before, I find it real fertile time. I get some good ideas, I have to write them down in a book. I used to say to my students, always have a book at the side of your bed, because you'll think about things, it'll come to you at that time. So I've always done that. I've always tried to, recall what I could remember from those times. And I've always tried to think of, like I say, the diversity of options available to any situation. The impact, and kind of extrapolate it through and trying to understand what impact that would have, to the viewer or spectator, whatever. So it's a very important part of my work and the way I see things. I tend to see it it's not just it happening to you, it's the way you project them, the way you see. So a bit like when I took that picture, with sleep on an iPhone. I really see, I think I'm looking through an iPhone a lot of the time, really. I look at the world like it's a picture. Like I'm looking through a window, or looking through I'm looking at pictures all the time. And sometimes, it's nice to have a camera on me now where I can just use it very quickly. But I see the whole world as a picture, and I've become interwoven almost into art and real life. Just going back, just one quick thing that really made me. My dad was an accountant, very, very, very generous, very really lovely guy, really. Had none of the negative qualities, he just really was a smashing bloke. Everybody thought he was great. But people used to take advantage of that, and that used to annoy me because it would, kind of take advantage of me. I used to get onto him about that. He says, you don't know me. I said, I know you well enough. When you brought me up, I've lived with you. I've seen what goes on. I've seen the way people take the piss at you and all that. And so he said, no, he said, you don't know. And in a way, when you have a dream, it's almost like I know some people take it very seriously, take it as a spiritual happening. And in a way, through him saying that, and the experience that we both shared through dreams, which are very similar, I did have like a message from the other side in a way. It didn't come through it didn't come through like a visitation or anything like that. It came from a solicitor's letter. And the solicitor sent a letter to my mum just 3 years ago. My dad died about a year before that. And the letter said, Mrs. Brooks, we've done an aerial view of your property. We need to take back part of the land because that was never given to you at the time of the sale in 1973, whatever it was. And so what that, my dad, he was an accountant, he didn't get anything wrong to do with the dimensions, he was good at all that. But he'd nicked this piece of land that was like the size, you could get a bungalow on it, really, you could get a house on it, on the size of land. But my dad, for all the, when I take the piss out of him and say he was too, too conservative, he was too logical, too not adventurous enough, he'd built his own house at 34. Not only that, he nicked a piece of land big enough to put another house on. And and he said, one day you'll find out something like that to me. One day you'll know the truth. And and I did find the truth out just a few. And what a beautiful thing that was, to see the kind of rebel in disguise, I guess. I'm just kind of rebel out, in the open. He was a rebel in disguise, I guess. So very lovely thing for me to get this kind of visit from the past, from the grave, really. So there's one thing I've started doing. Started doing about 3 years ago. I don't know if anybody else ever done this, but because of this period where you're half in sleep and half out, that very relaxed period, when I used to close my eyes, I was talking about John Berger when he talked about looking at the sun with your eyes closed and watching the blood trickle through your eyelids. Beautiful thing, really. Incredible perception to think like that. And so when I started to closing my eyes and trying to stay awake, just visualizing things. I don't know if anybody's ever done this. It's not a spiritual thing, it's a physical thing that really you can do, but it's almost like looking at a black screen of a TV, then turning it on and the light appearing from it. And so I just sit, lay back, relax, and then just start to imagine a light and a colour, and you can almost build. I don't know if anybody else can. I'm sure it's just a physical thing that anybody else could do, and start to build colour and build a kind of composition. Often like maybe an underwater kind of, or in outer space, where space is kind of all encompassing, and things come in, drifting, shapes drift in and out. And I was tending to build abstract pictures, and then imagining a colour and being able to create it, visualise it. And so it was the power of the mind, where it wasn't really a dream with images and pictures and happenings, but it was like a pre-dream where I could imagine, and I can't do it all the time. I sort of maybe once, half the time, I would say, when I try and do it. But when it really works, it's a very interesting thing, where it's like another alternate world, where you're able to control it, and take control of colour, of light, of shape, of happening, of the way forms move, and I can reposition them and make them grow smaller, and all through the power of the mind, really. And I think, I'm presuming other people can do it. I've never looked into it really, but I think it's worth trying because it's a very interesting world to inhabit, just in your own mind, to relaxation. It might be meditation, it might be something to do with that, I don't really know. But I really enjoy that, really enjoy doing it. So, give it a go. I think that's the whole thing, the whole premise of what I'm talking about really, is just embrace, rather than fearing a dream, or worrying about it, or thinking it's from another world or something. I just try and enjoy it, and then take elements from that into your real life. So I think it's sometimes I think sometimes being unusual or uncomfortable or awkward or strange or weird or bizarre, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's quite nice to be on the edge of something. It's kind of, I quite like that. Instability really. I kind of thrive on it. I don't always like it comfortable. When I get too comfortable, I get bored stiff. So I like things to have a mission or something to work against. And that's why I like the lads so much, because they were like that. They were always on a mission, you know, all the time, never stopped, you know, from day, morning till night, and inside and outside. And so I saw a lot of myself in that, but I've just been lucky then, I guess. And so that's what, I think it's just quite an interesting way to live. And it does stimulate your senses, stimulate the way you behave and the way you act and the way you and the way you perceive the world, which makes it more richer, so much more rich. When you're not confined to logic and expectation, then you can just step out of that and do your own thing, really. So that's it. That's about it, really.
Oh, great. And I love that last line, because that's what it is, isn't it? It's stepping out of logic. And I think that is, in a way, that guiding principle, and what we can learn from dreams, and what we should take away, isn't it? That we don't understand everything, and we don't have to understand everything, and not everything is always revealed all the time, like with your father, isn't it? This kind of I don't know how to call it, because it's not a secret, but it's like he had a little laugh, isn't it, about himself almost, and what other people think, but he knew he had this little bit of land at the back of his house. I love that. So
I think because we'd kept it for so long, we had like 30 or years. We had squatters' rights, and we'd have to keep it. And it cost about I think we had to get a solicitor, and it cost about £1,000 to keep this plot of land.
Yeah.
So it was just really interesting, insightful kind of thing he left for us, really.
Excellent.
It was good.
Yes. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Any comments?
I do.
Graham, I like the idea of you were talking about your dad building a home for you, and your family, like the house as container for the people. And then in his dream, he's the container for the house. The house is I just swallowed it.
That's quite good, yeah.
Reminds me a bit of Louise Bourgeois and her house women kind of composites, but it's a kind of circle.
Yeah, he was not artistic, but very creative and enigmatic kind of guy. Everybody kind of loved him, really, and it was nice that he had that other edge. That I didn't want him to be totally being taken advantage of, really. So it was just a nice gift to be left, really.
Excellent. Great. Any more thoughts? Otherwise, we'll...
yes, I'd like to say, Graham, it sounds a bit like lucid dreaming.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's what it is. That's right. Yeah. Is that a thing? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I actually went to stay with somebody in Maine, and he used to do it all the time. He said you had to develop it, but then he could actually go there when he went to sleep, and he did exactly the same kind of thing.
I've not looked into it at all, but I just thought it must be something. There's nothing special about my head. It's just this thing that I've just trained over years to be able to visualize, imagine things. When you look at any, when you decide you want to make a picture about something, it's helpful in that way. I've trained all my life to make an image that would kind of people would remember, or people would kind of resonate with them. Really, they would understand something of the idea behind it. So I don't want to just take ordinary pictures. I want to take control of whatever I'm. It's a bit arrogant, really, but that's what I do. I take control of whatever I look at. I own it.
The idea of you taking control. I like the idea of what you did, because I've tried a million things to go to sleep, including ones I've been told where somebody brings an instrument onto a stage and then the next person brings in. I run out of instruments before I'm even dozing. And there are so many things like that you try to get to sleep. I've got CDs of sea. I've got CDs of bird song. I've got CDs of stories I found of the children's, which I could actually recite now. But I've never tried that. So I shall try building a painting with my eyes closed. I think that sounds quite exciting.
In fact, let's try a bottle of vodka, but either one of those things.
They don't work.
So I would say the visualization is cheaper. It's free drugs.
Vodka doesn't work. You wake up a couple of hours later with a headache.
That's why I talked to lads about it. But I said it's like free drugs. You don't need to be swapping and dealing. Just use your mind. Just kind of turn it on, switch it on. You don't need to be messing about. Under the influence of something. Just get under the influence of art, really, and just do that. So it's a real buzz, isn't it? But I'm enjoying that more than what I see you guys enjoy doing. You know, what you're doing. No, there's no victim in it. You're just, you know, making the best of what you've got, really. You know, joining your mind and your eyes together. And just that's all you're doing, you know, rather than keeping them as separate entities. You know, it's just making that reconnect. What we were saying last week about, you know, joining the horizon, you know, we make that differentiation to a single lens and we start to see the two things come together. We know the sky's up there and the grass is below and there's nothing in between, it's thin air. But we stop seeing that, you know, when we start looking at single lens images, we stop experiencing it. So we can reconnect, you know, we do techniques in the prison where we reconnect the brain with the eyes. And very quickly you can do that. I'll do it one week here, you know. I think Michelle did it, didn't you? Michelle with us?
Yes.
Yeah, you remember it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you remember that, don't you?
Yeah. I can.
So you'll be all connected. You're all connected back up, aren't you? Your eyes in your imagination.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much, Graham. Thank you.
Okay.
As always, incredibly insightful and interesting and inspirational. And I think it's Julia next. So Julia, you've already given us a little bit of insight there. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you now.
Well, I'm sorry, Lisa isn't here, and Lisa said I was getting too autobiographical. But I'm afraid that's part of the reason for that is because I write in the middle of the night. And poor Roger often has to listen to it at some point in the morning. So it is rather, this one tends to be a little bit autobiographical as well. Okay, right, let's share the screen with everybody. And it's the same way I normally do it. And it's not very long, hopefully. Why is it not getting bigger, Roger? Come on, Roger, tell me what to do. It's not getting bigger. It's there, but it won't come up. I said it should. Yes, I've clicked on it. I've clicked away like, there it is.
Which one?
That's it. Because I've had it on. Oh, you must have a different click
You've
to
got a
me.
funny clicking technique, Julia.
Oh, I know. Terrible clicker. Right, here I go anyway. Right, put my glasses on as I'm reading it as usual. Right, I'm currently reading The Surreal Life of Leonora Carrington, which I can recommend, which is written by her niece, who knew nothing about her until she started writing all this. A quote in the book caught my eye by, of all people, the spy, Anthony Blunt, who wrote for The Spectator, apart from being a spy. His review of the 1936 Surrealism exhibition in London says, with Ernst, who she was having an affair with at one point, and Dali, one is compelled to admire a certain technical dexterity. But when one has done wondering at this, what is left? A gift for dream creation, perhaps? But the term seemed to have lost its vitality. And anyhow, are we to be content with dreams? Anyway, there's a Leonora one called The Giantess. And now it won't move up. Here we go. It won't move, Roger. Why won't it move? Oh, for God's sake. Oh, wait a minute, the side.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Anyway, that's by Leonora Carrington, who had a very interesting life, and I can recommend a book, but I haven't written too much about her. She's just was very inspired by dreams and her memories. Well, in our current state, I feel like we artists may need to draw on our dreams for inspiration, but also on our memories, much as Leonora Carrington did. I confess that I've always loved a party, and Roger and I have hosted many, but my favourites have been those with a theme requiring costumes. I admit I have always had a pent-up need to show off, and dressing up provides me with the opportunity. I like the spontaneous happenings that leave one feeling, well, that was a great party and we really enjoyed ourselves. And here, just to tempt her, we have a ticket for St. David's Bishop's Palace, A Midsummer Night's Dream. My memory tells me that one such party we held was themed around A Midsummer Night's Dream. We had returned from our summer holiday in St David's, Pembrokeshire, where, as always, the Arts Festival is being held. Every year since our children were small, we have attended Shakespeare plays performed in the Bishop's Palace ruins, outdoors, alongside St David's Cathedral. On alternate nights, the actors also performed offbeat children's theatre in the local school. Anyway, this is just to give you a taster of what it's like. There's the Bishop's Palace. There's a Midsummer Night's Dream. I've been to Midsummer Night's Dream twice. They did it on their 50th anniversary as well. And there is what they do to it to make it magical. However, the magical nature of Bishop's Palace never failed to please. Sitting outdoors in deck chairs, by the second half of the play, the dark descended and we snuggled under our blankets. The ruins would become lit up with all different colours. Jackdaws noisily flew over in the interval on their way to roost as we sipped our hot drinks. No other theatre has ever touched me in the way these performances do. So, back home again. On returning to Hull, I began to plan for my birthday party on the 1st of September, and I could think of no better theme for it than A Midsummer Night's Dream. Out in the garden, I enrolled old lining paper and painted characters from the play, which we later attached to the doors inside, as you can see. And here is Roger and I in our costumes. Roger and I settled on Bottom and Titania for our costumes. Any of the friends attending the party were young people I had met in the art college. That's the second time round at the art college. And being artists in the making, most of them made an incredible effort with their costumes. We don't enforce costumes, but we encourage it. And Roger always makes interesting invitations. And there's another party we had. You can guess if you want. We had one party for Roger's birthday, themed around the film by the Coen brothers, The Big Lebowski, a favourite of ours. Roger was the dude and I was Maud Lebowski. Not the only one, as I recall. I think there were about 3 of us dressed as different versions of Maud Lebowski throughout the film. If you have never seen this film, now is your chance in lockdown. I recommend it. I love films that have that dreamlike quality, and the Coen brothers films definitely do quite often. And I've put the poster up for another one called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which I absolutely loved because it had the sirens in it and it had a mythological feel to it, and it was quite dreamlike. One of my newfound friends who attended the Midsummer Night's Dream party was a man called Derek Alsop. He's the ultimate film buff, and although he unfortunately suffered from schizophrenia, with medication he had managed it very well. He became a close friend of our youngest son, Owen, who is a lover of film. In 2014, Derek sadly died quite unexpectedly, and I think of him quite often as he was both a talented artist and a writer of poetry. During lockdown, many people whom I have not seen for years emerge in my dreams, familiar but different. And this poetry now. Poetry is another of my loves and has always been since I was a very young child and I was given this book, Robert Louis Stevenson, A Child Garden of Verse. So to end, I will just read my favourite poem from that book that concerns bedtime and sleep. The poem seems to evoke the childlike imagination that Leonora Carrington delved into to find the haunting images she used in her painting. The Land of Nod by Robert Louis Stevenson. From breakfast on through all the day, at home among my friends I stay, but every night I go abroad, afar into the land of Nod. All by myself I have to go, with none to tell me what to do, all alone beside the streams and up the mountainside of dreams. The strangest things are there for me, both things to eat and things to see, and many frightening sights abroad till morning in the land of Nod. Try as I like to find the way, I never can get back by day. nor can remember plain and clear the curious music that I hear. Leonora Carrington certainly could get back there and into her subconscious. And that's to be done.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Julia. What a great journey.
I hope you didn't mind the children's poem at the end. I'm very fond of it.
It didn't strike me as a children's poem, to be
No, it
honest.
didn't. No,
I thought it was
very
very
good.
Well, you know,
astute, isn't
I
it?
was reading it when I was very young. I don't know how to get rid of this. Stop
And
reading.
I thought you were Starsky, Roger, in that. I thought you were Starsky from Starsky and Hutch in the photograph.
Oh, the cardigan.
I also wonder, Julia, when are we having a party at your house?
I couldn't wait. I'd love it. Anything. Maybe I'll have a lockdown party.
Definitely.
No, I don't know. It's one of the things I'm missing most, because Roger's birthday was his 70th, and we would normally have had, mine is in September, and we would normally have had some mega stupid thing we did, and we couldn't do anything. So our children sent very expensive presents to Roger that made him swear and go, "How much did this cost?" But it was lovely in its own way. But I miss the parties, because we've had a hell of a lot of them over the years.
Oh, wonderful. Anybody else? Any thoughts, comments? What, Julia? Oh, if not, I'd like. You've covered so much ground. By the way, I love the Coen Brother films as well. And you're right, isn't it? There is a dreamlike quality about that, but you don't expect it. It kind of, because it all looks so real and matter-of-factly, but there is that dreamlike element to it. I quite like the way
they're very different genres. They do. They swap genre all the time, jump about. But everyone has to it, my way of thinking. There's common sort of strangeness.
That's it, isn't it?
Like in a dream.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like 1 minute things are normal, and the next minute somebody's stealing babies from somebody.
I think you see that in the Ballad of Buster Scraggs, where there's 5 or 6 stories, and they're all quite different. If anybody's seen that film on Netflix, it's quite good.
Because I think that is one of the interesting aspects of dreams, and the hardest to capture, isn't it? It's that merging of realities and that changing shapes and time and space, and nothing is as it ever really is. I talk to my daughter a lot in the morning about dreams, when you still remember, and even just trying to recount them, it's almost impossible, isn't it? Because it's hard to capture. So yeah, anybody who manages that in some shape or form, like the poem, and I think the Coen Brothers, it's amazing. And you totally intrigued me with Leonora Carrington. I am going to have to look her up.
She's quite the one, but I mean, she kicked against. She called her father Lord Candlestick, which I find hilarious. And he'd become very wealthy through the mills and textiles in Lancashire. And they thought the only thing she was good at was art. They had her come out, in a proper, I think she was one of the last people that was a debutante. And they were trying very hard to make her toe the line. And then they thought, well, the only thing she's good at is being an artist. So we'll send her off to this guy that somebody knows who's an art tutor. Guess what he did? A bit like Artemisia Gentileschi when she was sent off to be with a tutor her father had found for her. But anyway, and then she just buggered off to Paris with Max Ernst and God knows who, and ended up in Mexico. And it's a very interesting tale, especially as her niece was given to think she was just a nobody, and then suddenly found out that in Mexico she was next to Frida Kahlo, was the nation's sweetheart. So, but she didn't get as much recognition until recently. Surprise.
It was interesting, actually, what Marianne just said about remembering dreams the following day. And I'm not really sure about this. I think children remember dreams better than adults do. I don't know if that's there's anything in that.
So as I got
I'm
older,
disturbed by sort of dream. I can be disturbed by a dream. You know, but they would start rethinking it, putting it all back together. I find that really tricky to do. You know, to think about what went on there. But kids do tend to come in kicking, screaming, say, oh, "This has just happened," you know, or "I've seen a ghost," or whatever. You know, it seems more specific in children. Whereas an adult, certainly from my point of view, I really struggle to.
One of our children had night terrors. And he used to shout things like, "The robots are coming," and he'd be his eyes would be wide open, but he was asleep. And then he would talk in a language that sounded schnurly, schnooli, you know, words that didn't exist, and we'd eventually sort of stroke him back to sleep again. But he definitely had, and he had no memory of them the next day, that he'd had these night terrors, completely oblivious to it, wasn't he, Roger?
Oh, that reminds me, my daughter had that, the older one, and it's just horrible, isn't it? Because I remember she sat there with her eyes open, she kept shouting for me, you know, for her mom.
And you're there.
And I'm there, and I'm like, "I'm here." And she was in absolute terror. It's mad, isn't it? Yeah, it's just, it is so fascinating. And I find, I mean, we might hit upon this, and I don't want to take up too much time, but how sometimes, for me, sometimes dreams are so real that I sometimes, now when I look back, you know, being older, whether a memory is actually a dream or whether I've actually really seen that. You know, some dreams become so real, and you go back to the same places as well. I have places that I literally only ever been to in my dreams, but I've been there several times. So yeah, lots. But let's move on to, who did we say? Roger. Roger's next.
right? Okay. So just bear with me a second, folks.
Don't ask me to come and help you.
Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm afraid in this one again, I go back to my youth. There's something wrong with me, Doctor. But there you go. I think as you get older, think about youth increasingly. It's not a big motorcycle, it's just a groovy little motorbike. When Honda motorcycles burst onto the scene in the early 1960s, they really shook things up. They entered a world where motorcyclists were either steady and reliable dad types, smelling of Swarthega, or be-studied acolytes of Marlon Brando's Johnny. The ton-up boys, the rockers, the greasers, the grebos. In came new and innovatively designed machines, garishly covered with pressed steel frames, and would you believe, built-in reliability. They also came with cute, slightly exotic names like Dream, monkey, and dragon, and offered a new form of transport, which adverts suggested was something both fun and modern. It's little wonder that I was immediately besotted from the moment that I saw my first mildew green Honda 50 in Vernon Street, Briton Ferry. I even remember where it was. There was a tech college next to my secondary school where I, along with others, would spend our break times drooling over, but never touching, the parked motorcycles. There were the usual collection of homegrown bikes, dull, 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 drab colours, each with its obligatory puddle of sticky black oil beneath it. But in there, amongst them, was a peacock of a machine with royal blue frame and scarlet seat, really no more than a jumped-up runabout, masquerading as a cafe racer with its ludicrous polished racing tank and naff fly screen. It was a Honda CB92, aka the Bentley Supersports. Even its name, derived from the Japanese word benri, meaning convenient, seemed absurd. By the time I left that school, I think I knew every curve, bolt, dial, and detail on that weird bike, which somehow, to me, effortlessly combined elegance with practical clunkiness. Something Britain had tried to achieve unsuccessfully previously with the likes of the Velocette LE. Writing this, I was struck by how strangely history repeats itself. My mind was taken back to art college thesis on the Camden Town Group all those years back, and how Japan had on a previous occasion shaken up the West's equilibrium, that time via the Exposition Universelle at Paris in 1867. There, a gleaming 750cc Honda Metaphor was dropped into the Paris Salon in the form of the Japanese woodcut and transformed French art forever with its fresh, flat colour and clean lines. The ripples from that sensational event finally reached Britain via Roger Fry's post-expressionist exhibition at the Grafton Galleries in 1910. The current slide shows the cartoonist H.M. Bateman's comments on the post-impressionist exhibition, in which he pricks the pompous bubble of outrage of this time, the British establishment and the well-to-do, something he made his trademark with his The Man Who series. It's disappointing, however, to see Bateman also taking a pop at the work itself. So always take your heroes with a pitch of reality. Circumstances meant, though I did later have motorcycles, the Bentley, or any Honda come to that, eluded me, and as a result, it remains my dream bike. However, apart from not having the now £8,000 plus spare to buy one, I, rather like David's Malham Tor last time, prefer to keep it pristine in a glass box inside my head, rather than face the inevitable disappointment that owning one would bring. Again, take your heroes with a pinch of reality. And anyway, it would most probably kill me.
Excellent. I like how this has gone into kind of, a different dimension of dreams, because that's what I alluded to at the beginning, because I think, when we talked about dreams, I'm sure we talked about the many aspects of dreams, and even, the picture I posted in the Facebook event, isn't it? It's kind of one of my dream places that I dream of that is very real, but, it's not real as in how I imagined it to be. So thank you, Roger. That's great. I was only talking actually the other day with my husband about those motorbikes from the past. We were riding our cycles over the Humber Bridge, and for some reason that came up. So yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It was back then everybody had a motorcycle, isn't it? I think there was a different time. It was a mode of transport.
Well, I think a lot of it has become a rich man's sport now, isn't it? I think. Yeah. I'm always amused when I go to somewhere like Bridlington and you see these, fabulous, huge bikes that come running in our park, and chap will get off and tight black leather suit on, and and his belly falls out.
I know. We once turned around. We went to Hawes, I think, during a bank holiday, and he literally was just full of bikers, isn't it? And we just left again.
Take their helmets off. They're all old timers.
So, I had a CG, a CB.
There's
Sorry, Glynis.
Sorry, is it not loud enough? I had a CB.
Oh, you.
Good hear you.
No, I had a CB Honda when I was at uni in the 80s. So it was the next model up. The CB.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The Vela set was used by the police. Sorry.
Graham, you go. It's fine.
I was going to say the Vela set was used by the police force, I believe, weren't they?
That's right. Yeah.
I did have one for sure. I never sat my bike test, so I could only ride a 125. I had the BSA Bantam, and I always remember, that's the thing, you get this aspirational thing where you want something, you get it, and then you kind of go overboard, really. So I've got like the period goggles, the hat, the old cap, all the old, big leather gloves, all the gear, and on this BSA Bantam, it was pristine mint condition bike, 1952, and I used to ride round. All my illusions were shattered when I drove around the corner from Acton. Used to go out during the day because I knew it looked a bit odd, all this kind of period gear. But I went round the corner to my old house, and there's a fish and chip shop on the corner. There's a load of lads, a group of lads and girls, all the girlfriends. As I drove up, I thought I came popping up on this bike, thinking I looked really cool. And all these kids just started laughing and pointing at me, going, look at that wanker. Just like, completely blew everything I thought it was doing, and kind of projecting it kind of, they just thought it was a joke, really. And safe to say, I just kind of never went out on it again, really. I thought, it's where your illusions are completely shattered.
When I first knew Roger at Art College, he had a motorbike and sidecar. Don't ask me to tell you what sort it is, because that's how interested I am. But he was always underneath it. That's all I could think about it. There was always something happening to it. And he eventually sold it to somebody, an Australian guy. He left it by the side of the road. And Roger was broken-hearted. And I'm sure, David, you're enjoying this because as a single man, you can pursue your dream. Whereas Roger has been enforced by me all his life. You will kill yourself. You're not doing it. Especially after we had children. I didn't mind before that.
Sorry, I was just going to say, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was going to say that it was a marvellous marketing exercise by Honda. Right from the beginning, they produced this machine and they called it a dream. It was a dream, Honda Dream. And each subsequent model after that became the new dream. So I have a Honda Dream, but in my mind, it's a 250, a CB 250. But I mean, it was a dream for teenagers that you couldn't afford to buy a motorcycle. So it turned out to be always a dream. When you eventually managed to have enough money to buy a bike, well, of course, all the other things came with it. And you suddenly wanted another one, another Honda Dream, a bigger one, a 400 or a 500 or something, or even a 750. And finally,
just like now, David.
Yes, and so eventually, when you get to be an old man like me, you get a Goldwing, which is the super Honda, the Honda Dream to end all dreams.
Excellent. Glynis, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just asking, because that was fascinating, Roger, that whole history of Honda, because I've only ever seen the 90s, battered old, the step-throughs. I hadn't seen those sort of jazzy ones that they had in was it the 60s? Because I had mine in the 80s, you see, I was in my 20s then.
I think American issue as well. Most of those adverts for American adverts that I showed at the beginning, I don't think a lot of them got over here. some of the weird.
No, I didn't saw any of those models because I would have stuck with Honda. But Honda, I had a Honda because it was cheap. You know, it was Kawasaki or Honda, and the Kawasaki was one of those a BMX, you know, motorcycles that you do. What are they called? Trial bikes.
Yeah.
So it was a choice between, and I thought, no, I've got to ride on the road, so I can't really riding a trial bike. But I did get into it. But as a woman, you're so, you know, there's a pressure to buy all the gear, and it's really expensive. But and you're a student, and then the other thing is, in the weather, you know, I mean, I must admit, I just got fed up in the end because it was like, you have to put all the gear on, go around someone's house, take it all off, then put it all back on, then get on the bike, and then it was just such a palaver putting stuff on. I don't know.
My memories are such that I had a very good girlfriend who had a motorbike, and we would go out to the coast on it. Can't even remember whether you were with me then, Roger, when I was going with Linda out to the... But what happened was we didn't have helmets.
Oh.
We had bandanas tied around our hair. We sat on them wearing shorts because we wanted to get tanned. And as I recall, when we got to somewhere, I can't remember, Easington or somewhere, I talked so much, you're all going to be so surprised by this, that I had insects all over my teeth. But you see, then we had children, and Roger had to accept that we had children instead of dreams.
No, what's genius is Roger's face just now. Everybody's laughing about Roger.
No, it's lovely. It's lovely.
Yes.
Remember, on your 70th birthday this year, they sent you all those presents to those children. And as a friend said to me, about bloody time.
Oh, God, it's...
The thing is, it, just asking Roger, is it the actual, is it the vehicle, or is it this sense of freedom, the sense of adventure and sense of the world being smaller all of a sudden? Is it that? In a way, everything's more accessible. It's that sense of, you know, personal mobility, I guess. Is it rather than the actual specs of the bike or the kind of the vehicle you use? It's just that opens up the world.
Excitement, isn't it?
That freedom, really. I think that's what getting into cars was that was like a...
Well, I think, you know, with the sort of, you're looking at the, especially on the corner, you're looking at the tarmac whizzing past a few feet away. That's, you know.
We're both lucky to be alive.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, it's funny as well how we share kind of, you know, everybody's got a bit of a story around a motorbike. Interesting. Actually, mine is because I'm from a small village and a lot of the boys were into motorbikes. You started off with a moped. Did you have them here? Like when you're 15, you were actually allowed on a moped, which only goes up to 30 km/h, but it was a mode of transport. Then you moved up, kind of bigger, until you're 18. And you can
they never got a grip here like they do in the continent. I mean, you know, when you go to France, you always see kids on little sort of mopeds, well, used to, whizzing around. But it really took off over here. You just got to 16. You had to, you know, you could have, when I was that age, you could have a 250 bike at 16. I mean, that's changed, obviously, for good reasons. But they never. I don't think mopeds ever really took off like you know you see abroad.
Yeah.
Good God, my mother had one. I can't possibly have had one of those, my mother.
Excellent. Yeah, and my dad as well, because he rather wanted me to have a motorbike license than sit on the back of some of the guys. And I've always thought that's quite empowering as well, because he didn't trust the guys, but he trusted me to ride a motorbike. But yeah, I never did. I kind of regret it, but I wasn't that keen. Excellent. Anybody else? Any thoughts on Roger's
I just wanted to quickly praise Roger for a really interesting presentation. I didn't expect it, and just made me smile a lot just to see these little snippets of old adverts and interpretation of those kind of dreams. Because, AKA, my dream is to have a Mustang one day. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much.
Excellent. Well, and if you know where to go to for advice, you can ask Roger.
Yeah.
I just feel like I want to go brush my teeth now after Julia's anecdote there.
That
Excellent.
was terribly glamorous.
Right, excellent. And on we move to Jill, who's our next speaker today. So, Jill, over to you.
Nearly there, everyone, I think. Can anyone see anything? I seem to have lost it now.
It's disappeared again.
It was there a minute ago.
Oh, there we go. There it is. It's back. Okay. Okay. Hi, everybody. For today's thing, I've dipped into different trains of thought concerning dreams and art. All of them are kind of unresolved and ongoing, a bit like a dream. Sometimes I think my dream world is ongoing, as if it's playing in another room, and then every now and then I go in and have a peek and get a glimpse of that dream world, as if it's kind of happening in parallel to this one. So when I thought about dreams, I thought about them in relation to reality, as if you've got a coin and there's dreams on one side and reality on the other. So that's the kind of direction I was going in. Strangely, I haven't got any kind of thing that's directly about like the unconscious, although I did do art therapy when I was after my degree, so that's something I maybe should have keyed into, and I know I've talked to Glynis a bit about it, but anyway, these are the 5 ways that I looked at it. So I thought of, and maybe it was to do with the image that Graham shared, that often we think of abstract images as dreamlike. So if we thought about oh, I've just had a signal that my internet's low. If it goes, I'll go in another room, because it might be better in another room. Anyway, yeah, so we think of abstract images as potentially more dreamlike because they're at a kind of distance from the material, physical, recognizable world. The aspect of dreams that I really like and enjoy, and Graham talked about, is the surrealist kind of use of dream as the unlikely juxtaposition, the things that don't go together, the unholy alliances. When I think of Graham, I think of his dartboard that can't be pierced, or that those kind of odd plays with reality that can be quite revealing. I've thought about dreams as like what's present, like what's the reality in the present, and how could the future be better. So dreams as a kind of hope or a wish for the future. And then I've also thought that about dreams, well, they are no more unreal than reality. And then finally, I've got a slide about art, sleeping and dreaming. So it's just different facets of the same thing, really. Oh dear. It's not going well, is it? Ah, there we are. So I don't think of myself as a creative dreamer, unlike my colleagues. So those of you that knew me at college, I had a lovely colleague called Steve. We used to get there in the morning before work and used to discuss things. What did we do last night? What did you dream about? And Steve would always have dreamt about something like the beginning of the universe or the end of the universe, something really kind of metaphysical or whatever. And I'd normally dreamt about some anxiety dream, like Ofsted were coming and I didn't have my kind of lesson plans to hand, and I always felt quite boring and uncreative as a result. But I have had dreams about actually being in an artwork that I've been in the middle of making. So this is or maybe I am creative after all. So maybe I'm part way through a painting and I'll go to bed and I'll dream myself actually within it, halfway through the space of it, or part way through the kind of composition. So that made me think maybe I've got a more creative side to my dreaming. I've also dreamt myself in the middle of a landscape that I've been reading about. So I can remember it was a book by Doris Lessing called The Golden Notebook, and there's a particularly vivid landscape in there that I can still picture in my mind, and I dreamt myself in while I was reading the book. And I've also had dreams about being kind of inside a sculpture that I was writing about. So because of that experience myself, I was quite drawn to this quote from Agnes Martin. So when being interviewed by Griselda Pollock, she explained that she dreamt her desire to keep making another painting. So her dreams were her desire to carry on painting. And when Griselda Pollock asked what are you dreaming about, she just said, not just, but she said, I dream another grid. And so I was quite drawn to that kind of idea, because I too had found myself dreaming about the things that I was making. And Agnes Martin's work, which I'm sure lots of you know, is very abstract, if we're going to connect abstract images as being quite dreamlike. Her work is very abstract, and always a kind of variation, a subtle variation on a grid, arguably removed from reality. Agnes Martin did also suffer from schizophrenia. I think we've mentioned, Julia mentioned earlier, an artist who also suffered from schizophrenia. And I remember seeing a really fabulous exhibition of her work at the Tate in, I think it was 2015. So anyway, I was drawn to that quote. Okay. For my next interpretation of dreams, as you know, because I've banged on about this a lot, I love city walks, I love public art, I love chance encounters, I love strange connections and unlikely combinations. I like exploring the city for all the chance things that I might bump into, or all the kind of strange combinations that I might come across. So I was really drawn to the idea of a writer called Steve Piles, who suggests that the city should be like a dream, much more like a dream than an architect's drawing. So he said, a city is dreamlike because it's disordered, fragmented, full of bizarre elements. And what cities do best is to bring different elements into close proximity with entirely variable and unpredictable consequences. So I guess this is kind of at odds to the idea of the city being planned and ordered and predictable, and yeah, those kinds of things being perfectly planned. The idea that Steve Piles kind of describes is the city being just ongoing and unresolved and in the making, and yeah, unpredictable. So I love this idea that a city is actually a dream. I've been really drawn to that, and I love that idea. And Piles quotes from Dickens from Dombey and Sons. So within a city, there's 100,000 shapes and substances of incompleteness, wildly mingled out of place, upside down, burrowing in the earth, aspiring in the air, mouldering in the water, and unintelligible as any dream. So I love that little passage as well. So the two images here are from, I think it's Dulcie Street, I think that's how you pronounce it, but in Granby, in Toxteth in Liverpool, and just odd little things that I came across. So there's those curtains literally being drawn and painted onto the window, and like the gatepost being turned into TARDISes. But everyone's got their own experience of the unexpected encounters that they find in the city. So my next little kind of interpretation is dreams as a response to a flawed present. Like, how could things be different? How could we, you know, how could we propose or dream or imagine a better future? So art is sometimes based in reality, and sometimes it's based in the what ifs, the dreams, the imagination, and the alternatives. And there's a writer called Claire Doherty who called this creative illusion, and that she always describes artists in their ability to think and act as if things were different, to imagine a better future. But I also like this idea, not just to imagine it, but just to get on as if it was already happening. And I think this is what happens with this piece on the right, which is Theastigate Sanctum, which was in 2015 in Bristol. And he created a temporary structure inside a ruin, actually, of an old church. And he opened that up at half-hourly intervals throughout the day and night for 40 days for anyone in Bristol to come and perform, anyone to come and watch. It was a very democratic, inclusive, stepping back and letting everyone be, you know, kind of performers, producers and artists. And it was a kind of not wait till that time in the future where we've organised it and financed it and strategized it and you know, made policies, but just get on and do it. Just imagine it's already happening. So I found that piece really inspiring. And then, of course, if you're going to dream about the future, one of the most powerful ever speeches is Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. And to represent that, I've done the Lem Sissay's recreation of that speech in Hull for the Freedom Festival in 2013. And I don't know how many people saw it. I saw it. I thought it was amazing. I thought, what a brave thing to do, to kind of reproduce, to speak that speech again. And so that represents this idea of dreams as the future is better than the present. Okay, then I thought about I'm going to have to move something along, I think. So that's in the way. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm really sorry, this PowerPoint seems to be out of control. Hang on. If I can get it full screen again. You'll be sick of it. And then I thought about that image. I think it was Graham or Marianne shared it on Facebook, and that kind of tanker hovering in the air above the horizon. And I know Graham's talked about that, you know, better than I'd be able to do. So then I thought about, and this is an unresolved thought, it's not a very sophisticated thought, I'm sure people have thought it in more sophisticated ways than me, but then I've thought about reality is no more real than dreams. So they aren't opposite sides of the same coin. They are much more similar maybe than I initially thought. Both are just appearances to either the waking or the sleeping mind. And we know from the image that I think it was Graham shared, that appearances are unstable, and there is a gap between how things seem and how they are. And how things seemed are only ever framed by our own individual perspectives and positions, so we never see things the same. So there is no underlying permanence or reality that is the other side to the dream. And then I found this quote by Manet, and I put that with the painting of the bar at the Folie Bergère. So Manet said, "Everything is mere appearance. The pleasure of a passing hour, a midsummer night's dream, only painting the reflection of a reflection, but the reflection too of eternity, can record some of the glitter of this mirage. And the idea of a mirage, everything we see is just a mirage. It's only an appearance, just as this floating trawler ship is a mirage. And I haven't got much further with this, but I kind of thought, is there a kind of double negative there in what, making a positive in what Manet's saying? So an appearance of an appearance, does that take us back to reality? A mirage of a mirage, a reflection of a reflection. But as I say, I haven't got very far with that train of thought. And that Manet painting, although I haven't talked about it for ages, it was a real favourite of mine for talking about how things appear, but what might be behind the surface and what might be kind of something that's going on behind the scenes, because the whole of that painting, or the whole of the background of that painting, is a mirror reflection of the space in front. And you can see that by the discrepancy between the barmaid and her reflection. So anyway, that's another story for another day, because that's an obsessive one for me to start talking about that one. So finally, I'm going to finish with artists who directly deal with sleeping and dreaming in their work. So I think it was Sam Taylor Wood who did some, would have been a film of David Beckham sleeping, and I think there was a kind of tenderness about it which contrasted with the kind of macho footballer. And I think there was a Cornelia Parker and Tilda Swinton thing at the Serpentine where Tilda Swinton was asleep on show inside a kind of glass case. And I also remember a film that was shown at the Ferrens, a very small one, but a very, very beautiful one. And it was a father, excuse me, filming his wife or partner and their newborn baby asleep together very shortly after giving birth. And I found that a very beautiful and moving, you know, he films them asleep. I found that very beautiful and moving. And so, sorry, I've really lost my voice tonight. Excuse me. So the final one is Janine Antoni. Just going to have a little bit of a drink, sorry. Who did the Walking the Horizon one. Unfortunately for yourselves, I kind of fall in love with artists and then I'm obsessed with them. So I always look at them. So I always like, I'm currently fallen in love with Janine Antoni. So here's another piece of her work. It's quite a complicated one, so I'm just going to read out the bit that was on her website because I think I'd find it difficult to explain it in my own words. So Antoni transforms the fleeting act of dreaming into sculptural process. Between 1994 and 2000, the artist slept while a polysomnogram machine recorded her eye movement. During the day, Antoni would sit at the loom and weave shreds of her nightgown in the pattern of her REM. The patterns were woven into the blanket that covered the bed where the artist slept at night. So there's a kind of relationship between her daytime creative activity and her nighttime sleeping, and they kind of seem to have some kind of symbiotic relationship. They make each other, her day and her night, her dream and her waking. So that's it for me. Thank you, everybody. I've got to get out now. I've got to escape this thing.
That's yarn above her, is it?
Wow.
Sorry?
Wow.
Was that picture of yarn above her?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, like a loom. Yes. I'll stop sharing.
I thought that was great, Jill. That was really good. I mean, that sums it up really. That final work I've not seen before, but it's like taking the ephemeral and making it concrete, really. You know, so that
and then feeding it back in again.
Yeah, I just think it's a beautiful thing, really. You know, it's that kind of thing where we're taking an ephemeral thing and trying to make use of it, make it useful into a concrete thing that we can use, or take ownership of, really. And that's what she's doing with that, weaving that gown.
Yeah.
I think, talking about it wasn't me that posted that boat. I did see it. I'm not familiar with it. That mirage of the boat floating. I thought it was a great image. It reminds me of this whole idea where people, when you're driving a car, you can see the motorway disappearing into a point. If you took a photograph, it would appear like that. If I was driving a car down a motorway at 70 miles an hour, and I thought it was coming to a point, I would stop the car, pull over, ring the police and say, look, the world's coming to an end here. Someone needs to come and sort this out. So there's that thing where, the world of appearances is just as unreal, really, as a dream.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's all about your point of view. If you're looking down, taking a photograph of the Earth from space, it's got a totally different perspective as what it has from being in a hole, deep in the ground in a mine, looking up to the light. And if you're on the surface and you're looking across at things, everything is distorted. Just one of those things, we've got to all understand. And I think the final point I want to make is that the idea of the abstract image. We're all the time looking for things that we kind of, people say, I like to know what I'm looking at, I like to, something recognisable, I like to be about something. And so they're looking for images or looking for iconography which they recognise and they can relate to. But in actual fact, they're all very familiar with colour. We're all very, unless you're colourblind, you're all very familiar with the colour. And so you get that transcendental moment where someone like a Rothko or a Pollock, takes you to another world. You can sit in the Rothko room and almost becoming a dream, surrounded by a dream, like that kind of visualization that I was trying to explain I practice. And it's almost being surrounded in the Rothko room. And so that's something we all understand, we all experience, we all know what colour looks like. We all agree on what a purple is. We all agree on what a yellow is. So there's a real, democratic kind of belief structure and acceptance that we all believe the same thing, about colour. And it's the same with paint on canvas. It doesn't need a picture of a flower or a dog or an animal it can be a person, a portrait. It doesn't need that. The iconography is pointless, really, because if you're looking at a colour and you're looking at a brush or paint on a surface, we've all painted walls, we've all decorated, we've all done shit, all done stuff like that. But everybody's looking for something that is really, slightly old-fashioned in art, really. No, it's not about looking for an iconography. It's looking for an image. Not about looking for an image. It's about looking for an experience, and that's what it should be about: a real time and life experience where it's an immersive vibe where you're altered by something, not that you're just appreciating a technique or an image or looks like somebody. It's old-fashioned really now, that. I think really we should be all interested in being altered, being moved, and being lifted by, or kind of involved in it as a direct relationship rather than looking through a window, like all the old stuff, looking through a window into another world, a make-believe illusionary world. Things be enough. I don't know, but I don't find that exciting anymore. I like to see things that are kind of coming forward from the wall and kind of impacting upon me, projecting, not me looking through a window, but then coming at me full on. I like that.
It's funny you say that, because that was another dream that I actually had of one of my paintings curling off the canvas towards me, like off the stretcher, curling off. And I don't know whether I did something with that. It almost like it was, coming out of the window or out of the view onto the wall.
I recall, Jill, that mother and child film, but it was in a frame and you could see the breathing, and that was what was so disturbing, that both the child and the mother were breathing, and it somehow he put it in a frame or so that it was so sort of odd, it altered your perception. Is this a painting? Is this a drawing? But it's breathing. And I loved it. It
was beautiful, wasn't it?
And it was very moving. Very, very moving.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you've seen it. I'm glad, because it's
Well, I think it's nearly always a case of the king's got no clothes. I particularly was obsessed with Degas at one point, and a quote he'd made was, "It's not what you see, it's what you can make people see." And I think that is like an artist's statement, really. It's about how you can alter somebody's perception with an idea or a thought or an image that you've messed about with. And I think I just loved the statement that it was what you could make people see. I think I had it on my card at my degree. Like, I thought this. No, actually, it was Degas.
Me and Degas.
You know, it's funny how, this has now moved to kind of ways of seeing and perspective. And it's something I've been thinking a lot about. And I've been reading John Berger, again, ways of seeing. And I think it is just all what is real, what isn't real, how do we kind of present it? And especially at that ship, I posted that because it really fascinated me the way that's real. You know, it's that boat is underwater, but what we see is it's not underwater. So how often are we tricked into kind of thinking we see something that's real when it actually isn't? And like what Graham, how you just actually illustrated perspective as well. There's so many ways, and what you've posted, what you've written, I think actually that might be something by John Berger, how things seen is framed by the individual perspective and position, because that's always what it is, isn't it? We only see what we can see, and the background, you know, our education, our upbringing, what we know, that all influences what we see. But then isn't that similar in our dreams, you know, and kind of don't dreams make us question reality? And I think that is a really interesting element, and that's what you've kind of brought through here as well, because, you know, in a way dreams make us question things, that permanent reality. So thank you so much. I think there was so much there, that double negative. And as you say, isn't it, it's kind of almost a starting point to go deeper into some of those concepts and ideas that have been kind of pulled up. So in a way, I'm glad that we have another session next week to go a little bit, you know, hear from other people what they've got to say, and kind of explore and think a bit more about dreams and these different reality and ways of seeing. And I'm wondering, I might suggest as another theme after dreams, maybe we could kind of take seeing and how we see things, or perspective, as one of our themes potentially.
Marianne, I think, you know, the ways of seeing was on our reading list when I went to study, I think at Hull College, you know, in 82, whatever it was. That was on the reading list then, and really, and it was way ahead of the game, you know, and that whole idea of perception. You know, it's still valid today. It's still a great read. It still makes me think, you know, in a different way. There's a brilliant documentary interviewing. You know, I think if anybody can try and catch that, you know, John Berger interviews. It's just a brilliant thing. You know, brilliant, real insight into the way the mind and the eye can work together and synchronicity. You know,
you say it's a great read. There's hardly any words in it, Graham. It's all the image, how the image is used.
But I think the two together, there are some, you know, a lot of statements, a lot of things in where it is off the wall, and it feels a bit off the wall as a young person looking at, you know, looking at that and reading it. You know, I think it's a good combination of words and image. I think
I read that in 16, and it just, you know, blew my socks off. It was so radical and different.
Yeah, it was. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What is it? Sorry. What is it that you're saying you should read?
Ways of seeing.
Ways of seeing.
Ways of seeing or ways of being?
No, seeing.
Ways of seeing.
John Berger.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone, by the way, just at the end.
Oh, thanks for joining us for the end bit. So I know, Michelle, you said you're flexible about either this week or next week, but I'm really proud that we've kind of managed to kind of maybe finish on time. And I think, you know, maybe some husbands and spouses will be pleased that we kind of don't overrun too far. So I'm trying to stick to the 1.5 hour slot as well. For new people coming in, it might be a bit much to kind of actually sit through 2 hours. So if that's okay with you, Michelle, if you kind
Absolutely. I'm glad actually, Marianne, because my stupid computer, as you know, it's a bit weird. It suddenly has put something down in front of everybody saying, new to working from home, here's some tips to help you meet like a pro. And I can't get back. I don't know how to get back.
Oh, but we can still see you and hear you, which is lovely. So I just want to, again, thank everybody who presented tonight for, you know, putting time and thought into it and enriching all of our kind of perspectives. And I'll definitely go away and think a little bit more about, from motorbikes to, hidden bits at the back of somebody's garden, to kind of children's poems and interesting Mexican British artists, to, Monet and ships and double negatives. And yeah, and thank you, Annette, for coming this time round. And again, thank you, Glynis, for joining us again. And I hope you'll come back next time. It really is always this good. I can promise you this. So I look forward to see you all next week. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
See you next week.
See ya.